Welcome in, everybody. Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, joined by Dionne Miller of ABC 7. We are continuing to discuss the Bears' 2021 offseason. Developments on Friday, Dionne, with Matt Nagy emphasizing emphatically, that's kind of redundant.
Emphatically. But that's what he did.
He is going to be resuming play calling duties for the Chicago Bears offense in 2021. Big deal or not a big deal?
Well, I'm not sure, because I really thought they played up the relationship that Andy Dalton had with Bill Lazor. And so I thought that was kind of part of him coming and that already having established some sort of rapport in that way. But then I'm also not so that's in that part I was like, oh, well, that is a little bit interesting. But then when you look back and you think about Matt and that visual of him in his man cave with all of his play sheets all over the walls, if you're wallpapering your home with your play cards, you clearly enjoy calling the play. This is something that he wants to do and feels like he's good at. And maybe part of it's a control thing. Okay. But it is going to be interesting now as he transitions with a new quarterback and who he says is a good fit. I mean, the first time there's any sort of miscommunication. I mean, that visual I have from last year, what is Foles and Nagy on the sidelines arguing with each other. I mean, we showed it so many times, and I know they get along off the field, but like that, there was a miscommunication there, right? So you're wondering if Nagy can establish some sort of smooth transition now with Dalton when he comes in. I mean, they will have the benefit of a full off season and that sort of thing, and obviously Dalton has that starter experience, but it's still a curious thing to boldly proclaim in April.
There's no question that there are things on Matt Nagy's to-do list that are demanding, right? He has to go about creating an identity for this offense. We can't get to October next year and hear them continue to talk about, well, we just need to create our identity. We need to find the whys on why the identity is not here. And he needs to find a way to connect with his starting quarterback in a way that is clearly creating momentum. And with Mitch and with Nick Foles, it didn't happen that way. There was no identity. There was no momentum in the connection. And you've seen what the results are. It's 8-8, 8-8, right? Follow the 8-8 road. We've said that on this channel more than once. And so let's see where they take things. I think Matt needs to figure out that identity. He needs to figure out how to connect with his quarterback. And then he's got to figure out how that works into channeling into the play calling on game days. He obviously, as you mentioned, has a great passion for that role, has a great enthusiasm about doing it, and now he has to do it in a way that actually makes the Bears a top, let's just say a top 20 offense, right? We can't settle for 27th, 23rd, whatever category you want to pick. The Bears have to find a way to elevate, even with a ho-hum starting quarterback in Andy Dalton. They've got to find a way to be a lot better on that side of the ball.
Now, as a self-proclaimed control freak, I do understand his desire to know what's going on and to have that kind of control over the offense, which is where his passion is. But you're now the head coach, so you have to, and you have a rookie defensive coordinator, so you've got to make sure that you've got all the other parts under control. And different from with Vic Fangio and Chuck Pagano, very different, because now it's like he has more to pay attention to. And I think that's when he gave up the play calling. It was like, okay, that actually makes sense, because now you're able to do all these other things. And obviously that didn't work out for him. And I felt like it wasn't awful when Bill was calling the plays. I mean, maybe I blocked out a lot of things because last year was just that kind of a year, but I don't think it was terrible. But I also know that Nagy struggled to step away, and that was really hard for him. And so I'm just interested to see how he kind of reintegrates himself into that role, or if it'll just be cut and dry and they won't miss a beat. I'm not sure. I just find it interesting.
The rhythm has to come at some point, and it's got to come with some sort of combination of roles, right? It's got to be Matt in the play calling role. It's got to be John DeFilippo working with the quarterbacks. It's got to be Bill Lazor doing what he does in the coordinator role. You have to be able to blend all these pieces together. You have to figure out ways to use your personnel. If there was anything positive that came out of the last month and a half of last season, it's that they found out how good David Montgomery is and what his ascension could be. And now it's like, okay, take that learning lesson, realize what that guy can be for you on an every week basis. And don't forget to call running plays, right? Don't forget to feature the run. Don't forget that now that you believe you have stability up front with the offensive line, with guys like Sam Mustipher and Cody Whitehair and James Daniels on the interior, use that to your advantage. Create that rhythm with the running game, which then loosens things up for the passing game. Maybe then you can make that incremental leap up the NFL rankings, right, in terms of your production, and see where it goes. It's a necessity. Matt's got to figure that out, but he's got to figure it out with all those other people around him. And Dionne, if they get off to a rocky September offensively with the same sort of problems that have plagued them for 2 years, this city will be on edge more than we've seen them on edge, and it will get ugly really quickly. And so there you go, Matt. Here's the play sheet back. See what you can do with it.
Right, exactly. And not to mention, you mentioned David Montgomery, but adding Damian Williams, right? I said that right? Suddenly I'm like, was that his name? Yeah. But adding a running back like that, who obviously set out last year, but he can be a difference maker and add a lot of depth to that position. So please run the ball. My fear is that they won't. That they will continue to, Nagy will continue to try to force his scheme on whatever personnel is on the field. And that is, I think, where the struggles have been all along with Nagy, was that he was trying to make Mitch be something he wasn't. He was trying to say, this is what we're going to run, you figure it out, as opposed to taking the best of what his personnel does and kind of using that to their advantage. And so I'm hoping maybe he can have evolved in that role a little bit, even having stepped back and then watching what Bill did and learning from those. I do feel like Nagy's that kind of guy where he's watching to learn, and he is okay at evolving, I guess. But yeah. I wonder for you what you think. The pressure more squarely on Pace, right? I don't think Nagy's in that hot seat just yet. Do you?
I mean, I think it's shared, honestly, because they've sold themselves as a collaborative combination for a long time now. Really, I mean, that they're in lockstep with a lot of moves they make, that they have worked hand in hand together for 3+ years now. And so I think that it's on both of their shoulders. And certainly no one talks about the general manager on Mondays after games. It's the quarterback and the head coach, right? Those are the guys that are under the spotlight on game days. And so Matt will feel that as soon as they start playing games and having results, right? Whether it's positive or negative, he is going to be squarely in the crosshairs of the critics and the analysts and trying to figure out what direction this team is headed in. So there's a significant amount of pressure on him, in my opinion. And it starts with, what are you going to do with that quarterback position? Can you lift Andy Dalton to a level that allows you to win, right, in the short term? Can you take whatever quarterback that we think they're going to draft later this month and develop him behind the scenes and potentially get him ready to play at some point in 2021? Those are big items on the to-do list once again. And so Matt's got his work cut out for him. He's got a lot of people around him. I will say this, Dionne, that if there were some encouraging parts, and there weren't a lot in 2020, it's that we talked about David Montgomery's growth. We talked about Darnell Mooney's emergence. We talked about how Cole Kmet evolved and got better down the stretch. You combine those three guys with a proven guy like Allen Robinson, who looks like he's ready to play on the franchise tag in 2021. Now, all of a sudden, you've got some pieces to work with. The quarterback's just got to figure out how to blend them all together, and that's got to be in conjunction with the quarterback's coach, the offense coordinator, and the play caller wearing the visor on the sideline with the Denny's menu.
Seriously, Denny's menu. It's huge. But Allen Robinson, can I go back to that for a second? Because we asked Pace and Nagy about, would there be any hard feelings there? He didn't want to be in this position, and yet I felt like he was not. I almost feel like maybe he was a little bit pressured into signing the franchise tag because of them talking to Kenny Galladay and seeing what was going on there, and that rumor got out, and then suddenly he's signing the tag. I mean, from the hard thing is that we haven't been in a locker room like we traditionally are, and I think that would help us kind of know his vibe. Do you think that Robinson's angry about this or having to be put in this position?
Here's what I would say. I would say that, number one, that it was more than just the courtship of Kenny Galladay that pushed Allen Robinson down that path. It's the fact that the salary cap came down, almost $16 million for 2021. And so what you start to see around the league is, okay, this is what receivers are getting on the open market this year. And it was depressed. I mean, it was a decreased value for receivers that normally would have been cashing in. They can't cash in right now because teams don't have the money to spend on that now. So I think Allen and his representatives saw that and said, 1 year, $18 million, let's go prove it. Do I think Allen's mad? Yeah, I think Allen believes that he has done everything that this organization has asked of him to earn the next contract. And he's frustrated that he hasn't got it. Now, to his credit, he's a true pro. And so when he shows up on the grounds of 1920 Football Drive in Lake Forest, he puts all that stuff on the back burner, and he practices hard, and he doesn't mope, and he doesn't become a malcontent in the locker room, and he leads the younger receivers in his room, and he does all of those things. And so the Bears are lucky that he is able to carry himself with as little melodrama as he does, given the amount of frustration he probably feels inside.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see where this thing heads. I've always said with Allen Robinson, I know he wants the long-term security and the extension, but I've also wondered why he wants to stay in an organization that has never gotten the quarterback position right. If you're Allen Robinson and you've had this level of production playing with the guys you've played with during your career, wouldn't you want to say, like, hey, let me go see if I can play with a top 10 quarterback, what kind of numbers I could put up. So let's see what happens beyond 2021. Right now, it's my understanding that both sides are so vastly separated in terms of what they think Allen is worth.
Oh, yeah.
That I don't know that a deal is going to get done but by the summer, which then puts Allen in the position to play the season on the 1-year franchise tag.
Yeah, I don't buy that they are having any sort of conversations at the moment, as far as like Nagy's not talking to A-Rob and seeing how he's feeling about it. I don't think so. And I find that this latest press conference, especially, like these guys have talked so much about transparency, and I just feel like it's not there anymore. And a lot of it is because of the struggles that they've gone through, and they've said things that it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel totally honest. Like they've got it just doesn't. It felt like that when Pace first got here, and then I feel like he got really, to use a Nagy phrase, but he got calloused to the media and was always like,
Sure.
he's a nice guy, a great guy, and he always says, hello and good to see you, and he says your first name and all those things, but he's not really saying anything, and and it's frustrating. And then then Nagy too. It's much the same way. I feel like, they say, I want to answer these questions. No, you don't. You don't even want us to ask them. You don't want us to ask hard questions, and they're gonna get harder when if things don't turn around quickly.
Well, and I will say this, and maybe this is a topic for a different episode, but you mentioned it earlier that we're not around the building the way we used to be around the building. And so I think there is a natural disconnect that comes with that. Your level of casual encounters with anyone, player, coach, front office exec, whatever it is, was gone. It was completely gone for the last 12 plus months. And so you don't have the ability to connect both ways to kind of understand where thought processes are, how players are feeling. All those things were removed from us. I mean, you think about it, Dionne, essentially when you sit down for one of those Zoom calls, you're getting one question for the day, two if you're lucky. And that's insane when you think about the way things used to be and the ability to shout a follow-up question at a podium, right? To be able to then stay on that subject matter for 5 or 6 questions with the other folks in the room. That was gone this last year. And so I think it did create a level of disconnect that didn't serve the Bears well, because they're not in a position where they have a lot to prop up as positive, and they weren't in a position to be able to also just kind of smooth over some of the rough edges, right? And so then all you saw was rough edges, and we're trying to get a full picture of a team while being like partially blindfolded and our head turned to one side.
Exactly. What did make me laugh is when Kyle Fuller was introduced in Denver and he had his press conference, and it felt like the next day the Bears were like, and here's Cairo Santos. Like it just made me laugh, because it's like they're trying so hard to kind of brush across the fact that one of their best defensive players just left the team, and they had to allow it because of the financials and all of that. But it just was interesting. It just kind of was blatant exactly where they are in their franchise, in the league, and where things are. The special teams is locked up, darn it. And then everything else is a crapshoot.
That's not what Ted Phillips told us. He told us everything else is there. Except for the quarterback and the win. So there are things in place. We'll see where they go. I will say this, on a positive front, the grip of the pandemic seems to be loosening a little bit, and there is the promise of actual practices being held in organized team activities in minicamp in May and June. And that's a big deal, not only for folks like us that want to escape our home offices and actually see something in the world, but for a Bears team that has a new quarterback who's never been here before, a lot of new faces, a new defensive coordinator, and Sean Desai. It's going to be beneficial for them to actually be on the field and not in Zoom meetings and trying to move some chess pieces around and figure some things out well before we get late into August, like it was last year. And it was like, this quarterback competition isn't going the way we wanted it to. And now we're going to go into the regular season a little bit handcuffed. And then the regular season unfolds the way it does. And you know where it all led to. It led to 8-9, playoff loss to the Saints, and us here once again trying to figure out the riddle on how they get fixed.
Yes, Dan, but they made the playoffs, and that's twice in the last 3 years.
2 out of 3 years.
Oh my gosh. He's Dan. I'm Dionne. We'll see you guys next time.